Hi, I'm Erin. Happy holidays. And if you are watching this, you probably bought one of my DIY ornament embroidery kits. And thank you so much for that. These are the supplies that come in your kits. And first we're going to start by prepping our floss by putting it on the bobbins. I use a Sharpie to write the number, and I unravel the skein and wrap it to the bobbin. Next, we're going to prep our hoop by putting our fabric in it. I center the fabric over the inner hoop, and I halfway put the outer hoop on, and then I tighten the hoop with it halfway on. And once I've gotten that tight, I push it down, and that evenly distributes the stretch of the fabric. Next, we're going to apply our stick and stitch pattern. You just peel off the back, center it on the fabric, and what I like to do is turn the hoop over on a flat surface and rub my finger around to really press the stick and stitch pattern to the fabric. And next we're going to cut off the excess fabric so we don't accidentally stitch it to the back of our hoop. I would leave at least half an inch, or at a minimum 1/4 of an inch. You might want some rubber needle grippers. Sometimes while working with all 6 strands, it can be difficult to pull the needle through the fabric. Now we're going to prep our needle, and this thread blending technique will be used throughout all 3 hoops. You're going to separate 2 strands of each green out like this. Just grab one thread, only one thread at a time. It won't work if you do 2. And we're going to get 2 strands from each color of green. And then we're going to join those together, and this is going to create a really cool thread blending. We'll put a knot at one end of the thread, and I'm just doing an overhand knot here, but I'll demonstrate another way to knot your thread. And then with the other end, we will thread whichever needle you want. There's 2 different sizes. A size 1 is the largest, and a size 3 is the smaller one, and it's just whatever you feel comfortable stitching with. We'll start on the 2022 wreath, and I will include timestamps below to help out with jumping ahead or wherever you want to be at in the film. So first you're going to bring your needle up at the tip of the leaf and then push it down through the fabric at the bottom of the leaf. Then bring your needle up on one side of the leaf just beside your first stitch but slightly below, and then bring it down in the same hole that your first stitch went down in, and then repeat that on the other side. This is sort of a quasi leaf stitch. A real leaf stitch would have obviously more, it would be bigger and have more stitches going down, but this is just like a mini leaf stitch. Throughout these tutorials, I'll demonstrate the stitches in regular speed, and after we do a couple, I'll allow the video to speed up, and if you need it slower, you can adjust the speeds in the video settings on YouTube. Now it's time to tie off our stitches, and this is kind of a tight spot, so you're probably not going to be able to weave your needle underneath these stitches. So we're going to use a method that makes it easier to tie off close to the inner hoop. We're going to create a little loop and lay it right out the loop right over where our thread is coming out. We'll grab our other needle and poke the base of our working thread and then pull that working thread, and that's going to create a knot on the surface of the fabric. I'll demonstrate this later as well. Now we're going to grab our brown thread that's going to be 2 strands, and this is another knotting technique. So using the brown thread in 2 strands, we're going to stitch our branch, and this is essentially a running stitch, but it looks just like straight stitches. There's no need to do a back stitch here. It will just eat up floss unnecessarily. And here's another look at that tying off technique. This is a technique that I am using almost exclusively at this point because I just like it so much. It's so easy, and I don't know, I just like it. Now we're going to grab the red floss for our holly berries. These are going to be French knots. I'll include individual stitch tutorial links below for in-depth explanations of each of these stitches. Start by bringing your needle up through the fabric, put your needle over your thread and wrap it, I think we did 3 times here. And now push your needle back through the fabric, not through the same hole you came up from, but right next to it. If you pushed the needle down in the same hole that you came up through, you'll just pull your knot through the fabric. At some points you may need to adjust your fabric by tugging on a little bit and tightening your hoop. Now for the lettering, this is my favorite part. You're going to grab your white, we're going to do a back stitch, bring your needle up through the back of the fabric. Now push it down, creating a little straight stitch. You're going to want to make sure you're hitting the center of those lines. Now bring your needle back up through the fabric a stitch's length away from where your last stitch ended, and then push your needle down where your last stitch ends. Generally speaking, when doing the back stitch, you're going to want to try and keep your stitch length standard, but when doing lettering, it's a little different because you have curves, and you'll need to adjust your stitch length to take those curves better. So when you're taking a curve, maybe make your stitches a little bit shorter, and you'll find that it agrees with the curve a little bit better. Okay, now for the most fun part. Grab your red. We're ready to whip these stitches and create candy cane letters. Bring your needle up at the tip of the 2 on the top part. And I like to bring my needle from the inside out. I feel like if you bring it from the outside in, it kind of snugs your stitches inward, and I don't like that look. So I recommend always going from the inside outwards. like this. And we're just going to wrap each back stitch by passing our needle under, and I like to use the eye of my needle because it's less likely to snag or split our white thread. Now that you've reached the bottom of the two, you'll go over to the other side of the horizontal piece. Bring your needle up and whip those last 2 stitches, and then complete it by pushing your needle down right there at the right angle, or whatever angle that is. And again, I'm whipping from the inside outward. If you've ordered your kit with the red plaid fabric, you'll probably want to stitch the font in a white backstitch. I feel like the candy cane lettering will just get lost in the red and white plaid, so a nice bold solid white letter looks really nice on this plaid. So we're going to do a split stitch, and it's very similar to the back stitch. You'll bring your needle up through the fabric, push it down to create a straight stitch, come up like you're doing another stitch. Instead of pushing your needle down where your last stitch ended, you're going to push it down in the middle of your previous stitch. Be careful to evenly split the stitch. You don't want to push your needle down and only have like 1 or 2 threads on the side. You want to try and get in as even as you can. The split stitch looks a little bit like a braid or even like a mini chain stitch. So moving on to our mistletoe piece wreath, we're going to first start with the branch, again using 2 strands of brown, and we'll be using a back stitch for this. If you need to, refer back to the earlier back stitches in this video or follow the link below to my TikTok tutorial, which will give you an in-depth explanation, and look at this stitch. Now we're going to grab our greens, and with the thread blending technique that was taught at the beginning of this video, we're going to create some lazy daisy stitches. Start by bringing your needle up through the back of the fabric, then push your needle back down through where you first came up. Now bring your needle up at the tip of the mistletoe leaf, draping your loop over it so your needle will come up inside the loop, and then pull and it'll cinch the leaf loop shut. And then we'll push our needle down on the other side of our loop, and that will tack it down. When creating these lazy daisies, it's totally up to you, but you can come up beside the branch or even in the middle of the branch to layer the two together, to layer the branch and the leaves together, which is what I like to do because I think it looks more realistic. Now with our red, we're going to make some more French knots. Refer back to the French knots earlier in the video for an explanation. You can also use the links I've included in the description for. You can also refer to the stitch tutorial links I've included below for a deeper explanation and closer look at this stitch. For the lettering on this design, please refer back to the candy cane style whipped back stitch that I demonstrated earlier in the tutorial. Moving on to our Joy Evergreen wreath, we're going to use, again, 2 strands of the brown and a back stitch to stitch the branch for this. For the pine needles, we're going to use the 2 greens in the thread blending technique that I showed at the beginning of the video. And we're just going to be doing straight stitches. So bring your needle up at the end of the needle and press your needle down, like I mentioned earlier, through the brown thread. And this is going to create a very realistic layering effect.
1,000 unsung, 2,000 second sons, sailing into Blackwater Bay, and storming the gates without warning.
It's hard to say. Could be enough. But we're not fighting to make you queen of King's Landing. 10,000 men can't conquer Westeros.
Once you're finished stitching, you can rinse off your stick and stitch pattern. I like to use warm water, and I also use my sink sprayer. I think it helps to spray it from behind quite a bit to really rinse out the stick and stitch pattern. I do recommend really making sure that you rinse out the lettering because you don't want any of the printer ink getting caught in your white stitches. Do not wring out your finished embroidery. Instead, roll it in a towel to wick away the extra water and give it a good tug to tug out the wrinkles. Lay it flat to dry, preferably in an area with good circulation or in front of a fan. To back the hoop, I start by snipping off any extra long tails on the back so that they don't show through from the front. For this particular backing technique, I'm going to want the felt to fit inside of the hoop. So I'm tracing the inside of the inner hoop to the felt and cutting it out. Then I double check to make sure it's a good fit, and it is. Now I place my embroidered piece on my inner hoop and I make sure it's nice and centered. Now I place my outer hoop on the inside hoop and put it on about halfway. And then I press it down to make sure that the fabric stretch is even, and I give it a good snug. And then I cut away the excess fabric, leaving just a little more than 1/4 inch of fabric. For this, I'll be using Dritz double-sided tape, but you could use hot glue or regular double-sided tape, but I do sell this Dritz tape in my shop. Now, after I recorded this, I did discover a better way to apply this tape, and so that's why the angle's a little different. But I just laid the hoop and the roll of tape on a flat surface so it's nice and level. Both of them are level with each other. Then I remove the tape backing and I gently place my felt inside the hoop, careful not to get it stuck on the tape. And then in small sections, I press the fabric to the tape. And there you have it, a nice backed hoop. I hope you enjoyed stitching up these embroidered ornaments. Have a very happy holiday season.